Okay, we're in the boiler room now. I guess we'll start with the hot water tank. We haven't had these inspected and fired yet, but that's coming in the next couple weeks. So unfortunately, we can't run through everything on them, but this will control everything you need to do. It'll tell you what status it's in. It'll do a pre-purge when it kicks on to get any air out, and then the gas will start, and then it'll say it's firing, and then once it shuts off, then it'll say it's in the post-purge where it's just pushing all the rest of the gas that wasn't used out. Shut-offs, hot, cold in, hot out, and the recirc pump is here. So that is bringing hot water back from the hot water system to the hot water tank. So then you just have a constant flow of hot water. You should get hot water to everywhere faster. Disconnect is here. If you ever shut these valves, shut the power off first, then you don't deadhead your pump. There's gonna be, this line is gonna have an expansion tank on it. And you need an expansion tank whenever you have a recirc, because you have to have a check valve on your cold. That's what this is. So the hot water that's tied back into the cold right here can't feed back into your cold system. And then you've got hot water in your cold, and it's pointless to have cold water. So that is stopping that. This is the hose bib, cold. That's on the 529 side. Shut off there. That's pretty much it. This is a valve, cold water in. If you want to shut off everything in the boiler room, shut this off. Drains on all of these. If you ever have to shut off the whole system, you can drain it there, put it into one of those floor drains. They seem to drain into that pit in the corner.
Yeah.
And that's a hot water tank. Now, the fun stuff, the big boys. Boiler 1 and boiler 2. So we've got, where do we start? Each boiler has a pump, pump 1, pump 2, and that's circulating fluid just through this loop for each boiler. They run on VFDs similar to the air handlers. You've been shown how to use those a little bit. Just those other ones. These are the same. Turn on the disconnect, then they're gonna fire up. And just right now we're just using the hand, which is just the auto, and it'll kick on. You can even set what you want. So it's set for 56 hertz, but you can set it to whatever you want. If we're gonna determine where we wanna set it, we might run the pumps at 80%, we might run them at 90%. So you just hit the up and down, and then once it's set, you don't really have to worry about it. So it can't go any higher than 56. And if you want to shut it off but leave the disconnect on, you can just press the power button, close that. Pumps aren't running, but they can if you want them to. That's pretty much the VFDs. The pumps have isolation valves if you ever need to work on the pumps before and after. We're just using these ones as the valve for after rather than put another one right after. And again, there's a check valve, just like on the hot water system, that doesn't allow pressure back on the pumps. Supply is coming out because it supplies the fins. Return is coming back cooler, heated by the boiler, supply out. And on the supply, we have all of our safety devices. So safety devices for the boiler. This is temperature and pressure, just like on a hot water tank. This will pop. I think they're set for 75 PSI. It might go a little bit lower than that. This is low water cutoff. So if the level of glycol in the boiler ever gets below this device, then it'll send a signal and it'll shut off all supply to the gas. So you're not, you don't destroy your heat exchanger when there's no fluid in it. And these have to be tested once a year. All you do is flip each of these valves while the boiler's running, put a bucket underneath, flip each of these valves, and these are three-way valves. So right now, they're allowing fluid to go here and down, just in this like C pattern. But when you open them both, they shut off the flow from the system, and these are only open from here, up and down. And then it drains whatever fluid is in here, and then this has to cut off. Yeah, yeah. And then when you flip those valves, there's no more fluid here. That should kill the safety. That kills the safety device, or it kills the gas, I should say, safety device. This is a high limit. When the pressure or temperature gets too high, there's a probe in here. Temperature gets too high in the system, same thing. It'll shut off the gas, and it'll give you a warning on the front of the boiler of why it turned off. Again, another balancing valve. These ones have been set and shut off isolation for the boiler. This is temperature and pressure gauge. And this one is a flow switch, and it's just sending a signal again to the gas valve. If flow stops, then the heating stops. Because if this stops, then there's nothing calling for heat, so we don't need the gas on, we don't need to heat the glycol. And yeah, that's those. Other boilers the exact same. Venting on these, so combustion air comes in these openings. We'll have a screen on there, we might pipe them down. And it's just taking air from the room to combust for the combustion of the gas. And then the exhausts are here. And these boilers call for a test port on this T. So if anyone ever has to test that you've got the right amount of combustion or exhaust leaving, it measures the amount of oxygen and flue gas that are leaving your system. And that's just what that's for. So you don't need to open it or anything, like clean it or anything. That's just a test port if it needs to be tested. This is just a big expansion tank for the system. It allows, there's a bladder in there that'll get bigger and smaller depending on the heating of the system, the volume of the system. This is your chemical, or not chemical feeder, but your solution feeder. It'll be plugged into there. There's a float in there, and it'll be set for a temperature. If for whatever reason you're losing glycol somewhere, this will just pump a little bit back, a little more in, so that you're always at the right pressure. And this has a check valve on it, so it can't feed back into this. And this copper from here is from the air separator hanging here. And all that does is glycol comes in from the supply side into there. There's a couple of, pieces of metal, make it a little bit turbulent, knock all the air out. Air goes out the top. That's always open. And then if any glycol gets pushed up there, it just slowly trickles back to the solution feeder. And another drain valve on there if you need it. Isolation valve for the air separator if it ever gets clogged. You can clean it out, drain it from there. Over here is a chemical feeder. If you ever need to clean the system, this is mostly just used, well, when it's a glycol system, it's mostly just used at the beginning. So we filled it with water. We filled the system with water and put in a jug of chemical, ran it, cycled it for 2 days, and then just drained it for another 2 days. Just, it descales the pipes, it gets anything out of there, all the oil from the threading, just cleans it out. On a water system, you would use this more because it's more likely to rust in the future. So you might put it in every 5 years kind of thing just to clean your system, but you're not going to do that with glycol because then you're draining glycol and what are you doing with it? So likely won't use that very much. Got a sight glass and a filter. We're going to leave a few extra filters, and the key for this I think is in here to open it up. Isolation here. This is a balancing valve that they'll set again, but if you ever need to change the filter, you put this to 0, you shut this off, and then this twists off. You can drain it here, twist this off, pull it out, filter just goes right back in, and reverse what you did. And then this is just telling you that there's flow through here, and it'll tell you what your glycol looks like. Now, the bigger pumps, again, VFDs, they operate the same way. Power on, open that up, this will start up. It's set for, I think these are 60 hertz. Right now they're just at 10 because the balancers haven't set these yet, but you can just turn it on with hand and it'll Start pumping. And these are pretty much going to run whenever there's a call for heat. These are going to be running. Let me just turn it off for now. So we've got supply from the boilers going back to that 3-inch and coming around the loop through the air separator and then into the pumps. So the pumps are pulling from the boilers, and then we come back together, and this is supply to pretty much everything. This one is supply. If you follow it, it goes in the boiler room at the bottom, or the crawl space. So that's doing the lower loop that side. The other one, the T that comes off the top, is doing upper loop on that side. If we follow it this way, the 2-inch going into the crawl space is doing air handler unit number 2, the smaller one in your office, and then it comes up in the hallway and rabbi room wall. 1.25 inch comes up and feeds that side upper level. The 2.5 that comes off of here also supply this one. 2.5 that feeds lower level all the way on this side and the far air handler unit, as well as the kitchen on both, top and bottom. And there's a fin in the vestibule and the stairs on the far side, like on the landing.
Yep.
And it does that one as well. And the 2 that are in the vestibule for these doors, just above the stairs, that's also fed from this one. And all this will be on the drawings that I give you. There's a lot of as-builts to do, but that'll be better described on those drawings. Those 2 come off, and they're piped under the stairs through that little hatch under the stairs. And balancing valves on each loop on the return. So this is supply going to everything in the crawl space, and then it goes through your fins, comes back on the return, and it's coming back here, and it's going back to the boilers to get reheated. Isolation valves and drain valves on all those if you have to drain them. Same thing, the ones in the corner, the 1.25 inch that goes to that loop. There's also a unit heater on that side in the crawl space off of this loop, and there's 2 in the crawl space off of this loop. 1 close to the elevator, and then 1 in the kitchen area. Those are just, they don't have a thermostat or anything, those are just going to be fans just running. And same with this one up here. Just moving air around.
Yeah.
They have isolation valves on them. They've got drain valves on them. They don't have balancing valves. They don't have control valves because there's no control. It's just power in, runs the fan, heated glycol going through it, just blowing out hot air. Another thing, there's condensates from here, and there's condensate from the HRV that's sitting on the ground. That just goes to the back and feeds into the pit again. I guess we'll talk about this, the neutralization tank for the condensates for the boilers. The condensate from the boilers becomes so acidic just because of what's burned off from the fuel, from the gas in the combustion. So you can't just put it right into your drainage system. So this is just a box of pretty much rocks and gravel, and it just neutralizes. It takes out all the acidity from the drain, from the condensate, and then we can dump it into the regular drain. I guess another thing on this is a triple duty valve. So it's isolation valve, it's a check valve, and it's a balancing valve. So this will be opened to a certain amount to let the flow through. But if you wanted to, you could shut this all the way, and it's an isolation valve for your pump. But it also works as a check valve. You can't have any pressure coming back. So we got one protecting each pump. And then these, I gotta think of suction diffusers before the pumps. And this just helps the pump pull. a lot of these pumps, you need to have a certain amount of piping to stop the turbulent flow coming when you have a 90, but this stops you from needing that certain section of pipe. And this has some veins in it that make it stop the turbulent flow. And they've also got filters in here. Not filters, but screens. Bigger screens. Just 2 bolts, pull this whole thing out. You isolate before and after, and then you can pull that thing out, have a bucket, pull that thing out and see how clogged up it is. And then drains for that suction diffuser, if you ever need to do that. Drain it there first and then pull it out. You got a lot less mess.